World War II wasn't just about legendary fighters and bombers. It also had the failures. Aircraft crews hated until they learned to trust them. The little observation planes that became rescue heroes. The SB2C Helldiver pilots called the Beast. The F2A Buffalo that died heroically at Midway. The C-46 Commando that burned crews over the Himalayas. The tiny Kingfisher that saved more pilots than anyone counted. Sometimes the worst machines still create real heroes. Curtiss SB2C Helldiver, the dive bomber everyone hated, Wright R2600 Cyclone Radial, 1,900 horsepower, entered service 1943. Top speed 295 miles per hour at 16,700 feet. Armed with two 20mm cannons in wings and two rear-facing .30 caliber machine guns. Could carry 2,000 pounds of bombs internally or one torpedo, approximately 7,200 built. It was supposed to replace the beloved SBD Dauntless. Pilots called it the Beast. Son of a bitch second class. Big two-tailed beast. They hated everything about it. Carrier-based dive bombing across the Pacific. The Helldiver operated from 1943 until war's end. Diving attacks against Japanese ships and ground targets. It carried more payload than the Dauntless, flew faster, had better range. On paper it was superior in every way. In reality it was a maintenance nightmare. Hydraulic systems failed constantly. Landing gear collapsed, tail hook broke, early models had stability problems. Pilots fought the aircraft as much as they fought the Japanese. But the Navy had ordered thousands. So units made it work, eventually. Field modifications tried to fix what Curtiss couldn't. Maintenance crews reinforced landing gear struts. Factory design was inadequate for carrier operations. Constant failures on deck, so mechanics welded additional bracing. Unauthorized but necessary. Some squadrons removed the internal bomb bay doors. Saved weight, improved reliability, one less hydraulic system to fail. Pilots learned to fly the Helldiver with constant back pressure on the stick. It wanted to nose over in dives. You had to fight it. Every single dive. Mechanics discovered they could adjust the tail trim tabs beyond specifications, improved stability slightly. Crews often pulled the rear .30 caliber guns. Replaced them with single .50 caliber. Better defense, but the position was still nearly useless. The Helldiver's hydraulic systems required constant attention, leaking fluid, failing pumps. Squadrons carried spare hydraulic components that weren't even in supply system, fabricated or borrowed from other aircraft. Here's what the Navy never admitted publicly. By 1944, carrier squadrons were begging to keep their old Dauntless dive bombers. They worked. They were reliable. Crews trusted them. But the Navy had spent millions developing the Helldiver, ordered thousands before testing was complete. So the answer was no. Fly the beast. Make it work. And they did, through sheer determination and constant field modifications. The Helldiver sank more tonnage than the Dauntless. Not because it was better, because there were more of them and the war lasted longer. Sometimes the inferior replacement wins simply because admitting the mistake costs more than the mistake itself. Brewster F2A Buffalo, America's first monoplane carrier fighter, Wright R1820 Cyclone Radial, 1,200 horsepower, entered service 1939, top speed 321 miles per hour at 16,500 feet, armed with 4.50 caliber machine guns, 2 in nose, 2 in wings, could carry 2 100-pound bombs, approximately 500 built. Most went to export. Finland, Britain, Netherlands, East Indies. The few American squadrons that flew it called it a death trap, underpowered, poor climb rate, terrible at altitude. But at Midway, Marine pilots flew Buffaloes anyway, because that's all they had, early Pacific combat and export operations. The Buffalo faced Japanese Zeros at Midway, June 1942. VMF-221 flew a mixed force of Buffaloes and Wildcats. 13 Buffaloes took off to intercept the Japanese strike force. Only 2 returned, both shot full of holes. The Buffalo was hopelessly outclassed, slower than Zeros, couldn't climb with them, couldn't turn with them. But Marine pilots attacked anyway. They bought precious minutes for Midway's defenses. Finnish Air Force used Buffaloes successfully against Soviet aircraft. Different enemy, different results, but in the Pacific against Zeros, massacre. Field modifications couldn't save inadequate performance. Marine squadrons on Midway had tried everything. Removed some armor to save weight, improved climb rate marginally, some aircraft had the wing guns removed, 2 nose guns only, more weight savings. Mechanics pushed the R-1820 engines beyond limits. Didn't matter. Still too slow. Still couldn't climb. Pilots developed defensive tactics. Stay in pairs. Use diving attacks only. Never try to dogfight. But at Midway there was no choice. Japanese bombers were coming. Buffaloes had to intercept. So they climbed to meet Zeros. And died. Captain Philip White shot down 2 Japanese aircraft. Then was shot down himself. Killed. He flew a Buffalo. Knew it was inadequate. Attacked anyway. But here's the savage irony that proves courage over equipment. The same Buffalo that died at Midway became Finland's most successful fighter. Finnish pilots scored 477 confirmed kills flying Buffaloes against Soviet aircraft. Lost 19. That's a 25-to-1 kill ratio. Same aircraft. American Marines at Midway got slaughtered. Finnish pilots became aces. The difference wasn't the plane, it was the enemy. Soviet fighters in 1941 were obsolete. Japanese Zeros were the best in the world. The Buffalo didn't fail. It was sent to fight the wrong war. Curtiss C-46 Commando. The bigger, deadlier alternative to the C-47. 2 Pratt & Whitney R-2800 double Wasp radials. 2,000 horsepower each. Entered service 1942. Cruise speed 175 miles per hour. Could carry 10,000 pounds of cargo or 40 troops. Over 3,100 built. Bigger payload than C-47, more power. Higher service ceiling, perfect for flying over the Himalayas. Except it caught fire constantly. The fuel system leaked, engines overheated, pressurization failed. Flying the hump in a C-46 was Russian roulette, but cargo had to get through to China, transport operations over the Himalayas. The hump, most dangerous air route of the war. Flying from India to China. Over mountains reaching 20,000 feet. Terrible weather. No navigation aids. Japanese fighters. The C-46 could carry more cargo at higher altitude than the C-47, so it flew the hump, daily, hundreds of missions, and crashed constantly. Fuel leaks in the wings, vapors in cargo compartment. One spark and the aircraft exploded. Engines caught fire. Carburetor icing. The C-46 killed more crews through mechanical failure than enemy action. But China needed supplies, so C-46s kept flying. Field modifications tried to prevent the fires. Mechanics installed additional fuel line clamps. Factory connections leaked constantly. Some units wrapped fuel lines with protective shielding, improvised fire barriers between engines and fuel tanks. Crews discovered they could install additional carburetor heating systems, reduced icing at high altitude. Some squadrons modified the engine cowl flaps. Better cooling. The R-2800 engines ran hot in tropical conditions, climbing to 20,000 feet. Pilots learned to operate fuel boost pumps carefully. Wrong sequence could create vapor lock. Then fire. Mechanics checked fuel systems obsessively, multiple times per mission. Every connection, every seal. Lives depended on finding leaks before takeoff. Some units installed additional fire extinguishers in cargo bay. Factory installation was inadequate. Crews wanted every possible chance to fight fires. Chinese operations also meant overloading. 10,000-pound limit? Reality was often 12,000 or 13,000 pounds. Desperate times. But here's what nobody expected. The deadly, unreliable C-46 moved more cargo over the hump than any other aircraft. Not the reliable C-47, the Commando, because when it didn't catch fire, it carried 50% more payload at altitudes the C-47 struggled to reach. Over 1,000 aircraft and crew lost flying the hump. Many were C-46s. But they delivered 650,000 tons to China, the most dangerous aircraft on the most dangerous route, and it worked. Sometimes effectiveness comes soaked in blood. Vought OS2U Kingfisher. The little floatplane nobody remembers. Pratt & Whitney R 985 Wasp Junior Radial, 450 horsepower. Entered service 1940. Top speed 164 miles per hour. Cruise speed 119 miles per hour. Armed with one forward .30 caliber machine gun and one rear .30 caliber gun. Could carry two 100-pound bombs. Over 1,500 built. Launched by catapult from battleships and cruisers. Spotting for naval gunfire. Reconnaissance. Rescue missions. It was tiny, slow, fragile. Built to spot shell splashes. Instead, it saved more American pilots than any purpose-built rescue aircraft. Observation and rescue operations across the Pacific. The Kingfisher launched from warships for artillery spotting, spotted Japanese fleet movements, reconnaissance of enemy positions, but its greatest role was rescue. Downed pilots in the ocean. The Kingfisher could land on water. Taxi to survivors, pick them up, then either take off or get towed back to a ship. It rescued fighter pilots shot down over enemy territory. Bomber crews ditched at sea, even submarine survivors. The Kingfisher went everywhere, into contested waters, under fire, slow and vulnerable but determined. Field modifications adapted the Kingfisher for rescue work. Ships' crews reinforced the floats. Standard floats could be damaged taxiing in rough seas. Some aircraft got additional life raft storage. Rescue missions meant more survivors than planned capacity. Extra rafts helped. Mechanics removed the rear gun on some rescue aircraft, installed additional radio equipment instead. Better communication during searches. Pilots learned to land in remarkably rough seas. Factory manual said seas over 4 feet were dangerous. Reality was landing in 6-foot swells, 8-foot swells, whatever it took. Some Kingfishers got improvised hoists, pulling injured pilots from water into rear cockpit. Ship's metalworkers fabricated these. Crews discovered the little R985 engine was incredibly reliable. 450 horsepower wasn't much, but it never quit, just kept running. Some rescue Kingfishers carried extra fuel cans in rear cockpit, extended loiter time searching for survivors. Here's what the Navy never advertised. The Kingfisher was designed to spot enemy ships so battleships could sink them. Instead, it spotted downed American pilots so the Navy could save them. Official Navy count says several dozen rescues, but that's only missions where a warship was present to tow the overloaded floatplane home. Uncounted rescues where destroyers or submarines picked up survivors the Kingfisher found. Hundreds, maybe more. The tiny artillery spotter with 450 horsepower saved more American lives than the massive B-29 Superfortress. That's not what anyone planned. That's what combat demanded. And the little Kingfisher delivered. Grumman F8F Bearcat, the ultimate piston engine carrier fighter, Pratt & Whitney R2 800 double wasp radial, 2,100 horsepower. First deliveries, August 1945. Top speed 421 miles per hour at 19,700 feet. Armed with 4.50 caliber machine guns or 420mm cannons. Could carry 1,000 pounds of bombs or rockets, approximately 1,200 built. Designed specifically to defeat Japanese kamikaze attacks. Fastest climb rate of any American fighter. Exceptional low-altitude performance. 3 years of design. Millions of dollars invested. Arrived just as the war ended. Never fired a shot in combat. The Bearcat was designed for one mission: stop kamikaze attacks. Fast climb to intercept suicide aircraft before they reached carriers. It excelled below 20,000 feet. Could outclimb any Japanese aircraft. Outturn most of them, lighter than the Hellcat. More powerful engine, better than any American carrier fighter that came before. But Japan surrendered August 1945. The Bearcat arrived too late. A few squadrons equipped with it. None saw combat. Post-war, it set time to climb records. Racing modifications set speed records. But World War II? It missed entirely. Field modifications were minimal. War ended before units could develop combat techniques. But racing enthusiasts later discovered the Bearcat responded beautifully to modifications. Pilots in test units learned it was the most maneuverable American fighter ever built. Could outturn Japanese aircraft that had dominated turning fights for years. The R2800 engine in the light Bearcat airframe gave incredible performance. Some late production aircraft got provisions for rocket rails, 4 rockets under wings, but never used in combat. The Bearcat represented everything learned from 4 years of Pacific carrier combat, incorporated into one perfect design. That arrived after victory. Here's what makes the Bearcat story devastating. It was designed to stop kamikazes. But kamikazes only became a major threat in late 1944. Grumman started design in 1943. By August 1945, when Bearcats reached squadrons, kamikaze attacks had killed 5,000 American sailors. The aircraft specifically designed to save them arrived too late to save any of them. Not because Grumman was slow, because wars don't wait for perfect solutions. The F4F Wildcat and F6F Hellcat stopped the kamikazes. Not perfectly, with terrible losses. But they were there. The Bearcat was perfect and absent. North American, a 36 Apache. The dive bomber that was never supposed to exist. Allison FIV. 1710 engine. 1,325 horsepower. Entered service 1943. Top speed 365 miles per hour at 15,000 feet. Armed with 6.50 caliber machine guns. Could carry 1,000 pounds of bombs. Dive brakes under wings. Approximately 500 built. Same airframe as the P-51 Mustang. Same engine. Different name. Why? Because Army Air Forces couldn't order more fighters. Budget restrictions. Congressional limits. But they could order dive bombers. So North American added dive brakes to a P-51. Called it a dive bomber. Sold 500. Bureaucracy created a warplane by accident. Ground attack and dive bombing. Mediterranean and Italy, 1943 to 1944. The A-36 conducted low-altitude strikes against German positions. Bridges, supply depots, troop concentrations. It dove at steep angles. Deployed dive brakes, released bombs below 3,000 feet. Then strafed with 6.50 calibers. The A-36 was fast for a dive bomber. Could fight its way out if intercepted. Unlike dedicated dive bombers like the Dauntless, some units used it for armed reconnaissance, finding targets of opportunity. The Apache served until better aircraft arrived, then vanished from history. Field modifications removed features that looked good on paper. Many units welded the dive brakes shut. They created buffeting, reduced speed. Pilots didn't want them. Dive bombing worked fine without them, so mechanics disabled them. Some squadrons removed 2 machine guns. 4 was enough firepower. Weight savings improved performance. The A-36 suffered from Allison engine problems at altitude. But low-level ground attack didn't require high-altitude performance. Crews discovered the Apache was essentially a P-51 that could carry bombs. So when enemy fighters appeared, they could fight. Unlike other dive bombers that had to run, this made the A-36 uniquely survivable. Pilots learned to use the speed, hit the target, don't circle, get out fast. The 6.50 calibers were devastating against ground targets. Trucks, trains, German soldiers in the open. Some units installed improvised rocket rails, 4 rockets plus bombs plus guns. Here's the truth nobody mentions. The A-36 Apache existed because the US government wouldn't buy more fighters but would buy dive bombers. So North Americans slapped dive brakes on a Mustang and called it something else. The dive brakes, pilots welded them shut immediately, because it was never really a dive bomber. It was a fighter pretending to be a dive bomber to satisfy bureaucrats. And it worked. 500 built, served effectively in Italy. Then forgotten because the real P-51 became legendary. Sometimes the best solution is lying to Congress. Martin PBM Mariner, the flying boat that worked without glory. 2 Wright R2600 Cyclone radials, 1,900 horsepower each. Entered service 1940. Maximum speed 211 miles per hour. Cruise speed 140 miles per hour. Armed with 8.50 caliber machine guns in various positions. Could carry 8,000 pounds of bombs or depth charges. Over 1,300 built. Larger than the PBY Catalina. Faster, better armed. But the Catalina got all the attention. The Mariner just did its job. Maritime patrol. Anti-submarine warfare. Air-sea rescue. Quietly effective. Anti-submarine patrols and maritime reconnaissance. The PBM operated across the Atlantic and Pacific, hunting U-boats, spotting Japanese convoys, long-range search missions lasting 12 to 15 hours. It could carry more depth charges than the Catalina, fly faster, fight better if intercepted. The Mariner sank numerous submarines, rescued downed air crews, spotted enemy fleet movements, but it never captured public imagination like the Catalina. Just worked. Day after day, patrol after patrol, reliable, effective, forgotten. Field modifications enhanced combat capability. Many patrol squadrons installed additional radar equipment. ASV radar for submarine detection, weather radar for navigation, improvised installations before factory versions arrived. Some units added extra .50 caliber guns. 8 wasn't enough, according to crews facing Japanese fighters. So they mounted more. Mechanics learned the R2600 engines were reliable but needed careful maintenance. Saltwater corrosion was a constant problem. Daily inspections, frequent replacements of corroded parts. Some rescue variants got reinforced hull sections. Landing in rough seas stressed the structure. Additional bracing helped. Crews discovered they could overload the Mariner significantly. 8,000-pound bomb capacity. Reality was sometimes 10,000 pounds for critical missions. Stressed the airframe, but it held. Pilots learned to land the heavy-flying boat in rougher conditions than manual specified. Rescues didn't wait for calm seas. Here's what the official Navy history won't tell you. The Mariner sank more German U-boats in the Atlantic than the famous Catalina. Actual confirmed kills. But after the war, Congress investigated waste in military procurement. The Mariner cost more than the Catalina. So Navy brass emphasized Catalina successes, minimized Mariner contributions, easier to justify buying more of the cheaper aircraft. The PBM was more effective. But the PBY was more defensible in budget hearings. Sometimes the best aircraft loses to the one with better optics, even after proving itself in combat. Lockheed PV-1 Ventura, Navy patrol bomber derived from commercial airliner. 2 Pratt & Whitney R2800 double Wasp radials. 2,000 horsepower each. Entered service 1943. Maximum speed 312 miles per hour at 13,800 feet. Armed with up to 8.50 caliber machine guns. Could carry 2,500 pounds of bombs or depth charges. Approximately 1,600 built. converted from the Lockheed Model 18 Lodestar passenger plane. Flying businessmen 1 year. Hunting submarines the next. Served primarily in Pacific and Aleutians. Maritime patrol. Anti-submarine warfare. Strike missions against Japanese positions. Fast. Reliable. Effective. Completely overshadowed by more famous aircraft. Maritime patrol and strike missions. The Ventura hunted Japanese submarines across the Pacific, conducted strikes against island garrisons, shipping attacks. It operated from land bases, fast enough to avoid most interceptors, tough enough to absorb damage. The R2800 engines gave it speed advantage over earlier patrol bombers. Aleutian campaign used Venturas extensively. Terrible weather. Fog. Ice. The Ventura handled it better than other available aircraft. Some units employed it for night harassment missions, low-level attacks on Japanese positions, fast strike, get out before defenses reacted. Field modifications increased combat effectiveness. Many squadrons added forward-firing machine guns, sometimes 10.50 calibers total, all firing forward, devastating against surface targets, ships, submarines caught on surface, ground installations. Crews removed some defensive guns, weight savings, better performance. Some units installed additional fuel tanks, extended patrol range. Finding submarines required long-duration missions. Mechanics learned the R2800 engines were reliable in harsh conditions. Aleutian weather was brutal, cold, salt spray, constant moisture. The engines kept running. Some Venturas got improvised bomb bay modifications, carry more diverse weapons, depth charges, bombs, mines, whatever mission required. Pilots discovered the Ventura could conduct low-level skip bombing, approach ship at wave-top height, release bomb. It bounces into hull, deadly against Japanese shipping. Crews developed this independently. Same technique B-25 units discovered. Here's the final irony America never advertised. Purpose-built military patrol aircraft like the PBY cost fortunes to develop. Years of design, specialized everything. The Ventura, converted civilian airliner, modified in months, cost a fraction. And in the worst combat conditions of the war, Aleutian operations, it outperformed everything. Better reliability, better speed, better survival rate. The businessmen's transport became the warrior the purpose-built military aircraft couldn't match. Sometimes the best warplane starts as something that was never meant to fight at all,